Well, thank you for staying with us here on the AM show. Let's get into our big issues. Well, one of the conversations today, pretty much, it's about peace and security. There's been many comments based on the NDC's position of not accepting the 2020 presidential parliamentary results. Well, if you look at my jawline this morning, and as we reviewed the newspapers for you and we touched base on myjawline.com, you noticed that we shared with you a statement by the former Peace Council Chair, Most Reverend Emmanuel Asante, who says that the NDC has no right to compromise the peace in Ghana. Let's engage the Executive Director of the West Africa Network for Peace Building, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze. A very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time here on the AM show on JoyNews.
Morning.
Great.
Thank you for having me.
Great. So I just want to take you back to the December 7 elections and some of the violence that we recorded. But sadly, we've recorded 5 deaths and 17 injuries. And this was communicated to us, confirmed by the election task force. What do you make of the kind of violence that we've recorded in this election that initially many said was peaceful and orderly?
Well, I think those who said it was generally peaceful are correct. These isolated cases are rather unfortunate. And of course, that also has implication for the long-standing credibility of Ghanaian elections and democracy in general. But I think that's something that post this election, all of us who are stakeholders in not just the electoral processes, but also in the peace and stability of Ghana, will sit down and reflect on the things that could have been done much, much better. And I'm sure that both the election management body, the security task force, those of us in the civil society, the Peace Council, all other stakeholders, I'm sure are also planning to take some kind of reflections and also use that to improve on what needs to happen, beginning from now to the next election. But I think that those instances that I isolated are very unfortunate, and I also join other well-meaning Ghanaians to ask for the rest of their beautiful souls and to acknowledge that they actually died patriots.
Would you still say these are isolated incidents when we've recorded 5 deaths?
Well, if you look at the population, I think it depends on your definition of isolated cases. If you look at the population of Ghana and the size of Ghana, and you also compare that with what happens generally in elections across our region and continent, well, I think it's safe to say they're isolated. But again, that does not mean that the death of one Ghanaian is acceptable. It is unacceptable. Not in any issue list talk about elections that are supposed to give them the opportunity to either renew or change the mandate that they've given to politicians. That's not acceptable.
What difference would an effective prosecution of those who committed these crimes, what would it do, especially looking at where we are?
It is extremely important. It also adds or removes credibility in the administration. It is important to give, because it gives confidence to the electorate and the citizens that impunity cannot be allowed to thrive, and that if you kill under any guise and without due process, then you have to answer for it. Whether it is the security agents or citizens killing one another, I think it's important to find the cure and also find redress in a court of law and bring those who are the perpetrators to book, and also reassure not just the victim's family, but also other citizens that we don't live in Banana Republic where you can do anything and get away with it. It is very important.
There are many calling on the NDC to seek redress in court. But indeed, if you speak to the NDC, they would also tell you that the protests, the many ways that they are also seeking to express their disappointment with the results of the 2020 elections are also legitimate. I mean, it's their legal rights. You can protest. You can go in a march like they've been doing. And so the court is not the only place where they can absolutely resolve their issues. As a security person, and as you've been analyzing a lot of security matters, particularly this one linked with elections directly, what do you make of the fact that what they're doing is also legitimately right?
I think it's important to, first of all, acknowledge that it is within the rights of NDC to have peaceful protests. It is also important to acknowledge that when they feel that they are hurt, they need to be allowed to express themselves in the most peaceful manner that they can. However, it is also important that NDC also begin to appreciate what is at stake at the moment. Those protests within the context of a global pandemic, within the context of already charged environment, how do they resolve the issues at hand? Or will they need to sit down and reflect whether the protests at the end of the day will yield the results that they seek for and also enthrone peace in the country they love so much and actually wanted to govern. So that's a way to balance it, but to obviously acknowledge that it is within their rights to express themselves in a manner that they feel they will be heard. If they feel that they have not been fairly treated in an election, it is within their rights.
What's been the experience on the continent? Can we still follow through with peaceful marches and protests in resolving this matter?
Well, again, at the end of the day, because I'm a professional mediator, at the end of the day, I'll go for sitting around the table. And also to acknowledge that people should also appreciate that within the continuum of dispute resolution mechanisms, that the court system is part of it. Also, other alternative mechanisms are also part of it. And I'm sure that we have very credible, very independent minds that can engage all parties, all sides, and find lasting solution to this. I think the most important thing is that the NDC want to be heard. But I also think that the other thing to acknowledge is that it looks to me like the MPP or the government in power is also ready to listen. And once this is established, then it makes even the mediation much, much easier. The other thing is to also establish the parameters under which such dialogue will take place. And more importantly, to assure all parties of the credibility of the process, whether it is the court system they are using, what are the fears that they expressed about not using the courts? If it is the good offices of some of this independent mind that I've talked about, are they assured, all parties are assured of the credibility of the process and also the ability to implement the outcome? I think if you look at some of these fears that have been expressed, they have to do with distrust. And some of those elements are not things that we can ignore. There needs to be a process of reassuring all parties on both sides about the credibility of the process.
Mr. Chukwuemeka, as many have applauded the Ghana Police Service, indeed the security service, for a good job so far, because even on the day of declaration, we saw that NDC members massed up at the Electoral Commission head office. They were at their headquarters as well as in the NDC headquarters. And then in the aftermath of the declaration, we've seen them also marching on the streets. Just Sunday, through one of those marches, there were some arrests. And we're now even beginning to highlight on that. So if you look at the Daily Graphic newspaper of today on the back page, it says police arrest 5 for riots and burning lorry tires on streets, and it's linked to the protests. But largely, many have said that the police has handled this really well. My question is, for how long do you think they can hold this together so that it does not degenerate?
My opinion is that while we continue to appreciate the police for what they are doing because it is their duty to maintain law and order. While it is within the right of NDC to protest, it is also within the right of other citizens to also go about their daily businesses without fear of molestation. But beyond that, I think it's important that spaces are created to assuage the fears of NDC. It is important that spaces are created to hear them out. It is also important that whatever they consider to be their misgivings about using other means other than the protest should be listened to and also, in my opinion, addressed. Not just because of today, but because of future processes. It is important that political actors have faith in the institutions of the states that is available for redress. And where they do not trust those institutions of the state, they must have a means of being allowed to express why they do not trust those institutions, and clarifications are given. That's how institutions and states is governed and also operated, in my opinion.
If you listen to the leadership of the NDC and throughout their public commentary on not accepting the results of the 2020 elections, they haven't directly said that what their supporters are doing, they haven't directly called them off the streets. Their supporters have been expressing their disappointment, and they seem to agree with them. My question is, what's the role of leadership in this regard? What's the essence of we not hearing anything directly from the NDC leadership to their supporters?
I think, again, we need to appreciate that elections are conducted within an atmosphere of charged emotions. And when people feel aggrieved about the processes of an election, there is little or if at all, anything that the leadership of NDC can do beyond asking for peaceful means of expression. Okay? Not expressing themselves at all is not an option. Okay? But again, it may also not be 100% correct to make the assumption that the leadership of NDC may not be speaking to their followership. You also will understand that no leader wants to appear to be weak before his or her followers. So it is within that constraint that I also sympathize with the leadership of NDC. But what I'm saying is that we need to move away from this emotional state that, in my opinion, is gradually supposed to be fading away, and now come to allowing reasoning. And what does reasoning do? Reasoning also enables you to reflect on the process so far and to ask yourself, is there another means? For now, or before now, it may be difficult to ask those questions because that's the natural instinct of human beings. I must be heard. Now that this emotion is fading away, how do we now engage at the level of reasoning?
Are the emotions fading away, as you put it?
I think it is gradually supposed to be fading away because this cannot be sustainable. And yet, clarifications need to be given where there are gray areas.
So, if you look at the comments that has come in, and again, my Line has been reporting on the former Peace Council chair. Maybe before I even come to that, what kind of role should state institutions be playing? And when I ask what role, and I'm talking about the Peace Council in particular, remember that they had made an initial attempt to speak to the NDC directly, where they say some youth had disrupted the meeting. In the process, some of the leadership that went there were traumatized. They were making a second attempt to engage the parties. But what specific roles and who should be playing what role exactly at this point?
I was part of that team that went to visit the NDC. and I think it will not be fair for me to discuss within the ethics of mediation. It will not be fair for me to discuss what transpired at that meeting. However, I think that the National Peace Council has the mandate, backed by an act of parliament, to facilitate a peaceful resolution of disputes in Ghana. And I think, and I know, that that's exactly what they have been doing. They may not be seen publicly making pronouncements or saying certain things, but I can assure you, as one of the technical partners to National Peace Council, that they are not sleeping at all. Behind the scene actions that are taking place will soon begin to yield results, in my opinion.
The NDC...
It is about the planning process. It is about the engagement process. But to also acknowledge that these are not things that you just wish away in a day or two. It is a process, and that's why it is called peace building, So it is a continuous process.
I acknowledge that, except that the NDC had raised a lot of issues even before the declaration. And I'm just wondering, where was the National Peace Council? Couldn't the conversations have started way before the declaration?
We also need to acknowledge, the first thing is that it may not be correct to say that the National Peace Council were not engaging before the declaration. They did. I can assure you that. Again,
so did it fail then? Did it fail?
It depends on what you mean by failure. What do you mean by failure? I said it's a process. It is a process, and does not take a linear progression. It is something that you can achieve results today, and tomorrow we are talking about human behavior. And again, I want to reiterate that the ethics of mediation does not allow a mediator to expose the outcome of the discussions. But I can assure you, all I can say at the moment is that things were ongoing before the declaration of the results, things continued, and things will continue.
How long would it take for us to resolve this if there is no court action?
How long also means that I have control over people's emotion and reasoning. And our duty as mediators is always to provide an enabling environment for people to express themselves. And because we are dealing with human science, it is difficult to predict. However, are there progress that have been made? Yes. What would have happened if nothing was being done at all? That's the question people are not asking. So the fact that you are able to be at work today, if you compare that with what has happened in the past in Kenya, or even like Cote d'Ivoire, very close to you, you will understand that and appreciate that things are actually going on. And people are actually circumspect. And both NDC and other political parties are also patriotic citizens. And that's why we are where we are at the moment.
Would a court action help speed up a mediation process?
The court system is part and parcel of the continuum of dispute resolution. So if the parties in disputes feel that the court will give them the needed result, why not? It is important to test some of the allegations in a court system, because what it does is also that it enriches the democratic ethos. It also enriches the process of democracy. And through that court system, even if nobody wins or somebody loses, there are lessons to be learned that will help in enriching the electoral process in Ghana. Why not?
So a multiple means of resolution, including a court system, could be happening at the same time?
Yeah, for me, anything that is legitimate and that entrenches peace is allowed. Why not? The court system is part of what the Electoral Act approved as a means of resolving disputes. IPAC is part of the platform that is provided. So anyone that parties feel will give them the needed results. Why not?
Yesterday, Parliament reconvened after the break, making way for the elections. And we saw the minority in Parliament saying that they were mourning the collapse of democracy. If this continues, in terms of Parliament also picking up and starting something on its own, then where would it leave us?
Again, you cannot isolate the way and manner NDC is expressing themselves. I think this is holistic in manner. So that is not expected that the parliament can come up with their own way of expressing themselves. So once we begin to resolve the fundamental issues, all those things definitely will fizzle out. So I don't expect them to continue in isolation.
Well, Chukwuemeka, maybe finally I should just ask you, sometimes it's very difficult when we are reporting on these matters because we report when it happens. And you'll have some of these players speak to you and propagate, their own positions on these matters. How can we be cautious so that we're not adding to an already complicated situation?
I sympathize with the media, honestly, because you provide a platform through which people are heard. Some of the things people say, you don't have control over them. But again, to also acknowledge that each time people are on your platform, so long as they are not raising issues that passes the test of peace and stability, then it is time to cut them off and also to caution them. This is not the time to begin to stoke the words that could further be divisive in nature. I think the platform should be given to people who are more reconciliatory in their tone. However, to also not over bottle people and refuse to give them platform to express themselves, because expression then takes a different form if they are not in words. So it is about how to balance this and how the media also continuously preach that which will entrench peace in an already charged environment.
Well, Chukwuemeka, I thank you very much for your time this morning. Thank you for the conversation.
Anytime.
All right, that's the Executive Director of the West African Network for Peace Building, Chukwuemeka Eze, on this. This is still very fresh. This is still very much developing. The position that the NDC has taken in terms of not accepting the result of the 2020 elections yesterday.